Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on nature, risk and resilience reporting for farmers. My name's Dan. I'm one of the directors here at LandApp and delighted to be leading this first of three webinars where we're going to be really talking through our nature, risk, resilience reporting tool, but from the perspective of farmers. Today is webinar one, where we're going to be looking at mapping basics and understanding baselines. So if you've never been on a LandApp webinar before, just a bit of housekeeping before we start. As it is a webinar, your camera and microphone will remain off for the duration of the webinar, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We have activated the Q&A function within Zoom, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen, where you can ask any questions that you may have. And we've got a dedicated 15 minutes at the end of the webinar, so just around 4:45, where we'll be going through those Q&As and some of the LandApp team as well are behind the scenes who can help answer any questions we may have. If there's time as well, we'll always like to enjoy staying online for a couple of minutes after the webinar, and so we can have a bit of a discussion with you coming off mute if that's of interest. As usual, the webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with everyone who's registered afterwards. And finally, at the end of your session, if you leave either throughout or hopefully at the end, there's a short feedback form that will appear on your screen. It should take no more than 30 seconds to fill it out, but if you could fill it out, it'd really help us hone and improve these sessions moving forward. So today, as I mentioned, this is webinar one of a three-part webinar series. And so I'm going to just spend 10 minutes at the start, just going through some slides about what to expect from the webinar series, and also just touch on what is LandApp and what does it mean when we say nature reporting. Many of you who are watching this may have been asked to join LandApp for a particular customer, whether that's a retailer or a processor. And so we think it's really important to give you a bit of clarity on what we're doing and why we're doing it. I'm then going to spend half an hour or so doing a bit of a live demo of the tool. And as this is going back to basics, I'm going to go through it as slow as I can. And we're going to be working through the concept of building a baseline. So how do you start building your first map from scratch? I'm going to touch on some key features. So looking at, elements beyond just what the supermarket is asking for on how it can help you as a farming business. And then also we're going to look at some ways of exporting that data. One of my favorites is just to show you quickly how you can print off the map that's generated and maybe pin it on your office wall. Everyone loves a good map, and I'm definitely part of that. And then, like I said, there's going to be a dedicated time for questions and answers at the end. So anything that comes up throughout the webinar, please do pop that in the Q&A function. So just going to be a bit of promo for the three-part webinar series. This is the first one, which is today, Tuesday the 19th, where we're going to be looking through the basics. But just as a reminder, by registering for today's webinar, you've also registered for webinar 2 and webinar 3. And so if you can attend them, it'd be great to have you. One's on Tuesday the 2nd and one's on Tuesday the 16th of June. The next webinar is going to be focused more around understanding your metrics and your data. So by the end of today, I should be able to at least show you some scores for the farm that we generate. But that webinar is really going to be looking at the detail of the metrics, what they mean, and how you can use them as a farming business. And then the third one will hopefully be packaging up what we've learned from webinar 1 and webinar 2 into the future planning. We know it's really important for farmers to understand what they're doing today, but what really excites all of us and why we're really in business is how do we help you plan for the future, become more resilient as a business, and also look at other benefits such as what you can bring nature, etc. And so that's, as a reminder, is always on a Tuesday. It's always at 4 p.m. And they're every 2 weeks from now. So really, the series' purpose was now we're nearly reaching 2,000 farmers coming through the nature risk resilience reporting system, which is amazing, and that's through a number of different partnerships that we've got in the sector. But one thing keeps coming clear is we need to make sure that farmers understand the benefits to them, and so that's kind of why this webinar series was born, and really just trying to empower and educate you on understanding what LandApp can do for you as a farming business, understanding how the platform's got wider benefits beyond just helping and understanding what the supermarket is asking for. And that involves demystifying kind of the metrics. We know some of you on this call may already have their farm metrics, which is great. And don't worry if you don't. But we want to run these webinar series to make sure you have an understanding of both the metrics themselves, but also understanding what we mean by data and how that data is being used, and giving you transparency on what it's being used for, and also what it's not being used for as well. And then the third thing is just at times we've had feedback that sometimes nature reporting can feel like it's just a tick box exercise for certain customers. And I really want to demonstrate the value of, yes, we can help with a bit of compliance and a bit of supporting your supermarket being content with what you're doing, but ultimately we're trying to deliver and prove to you there's commercial value in you or one of your team members spending a bit more time on LandApp, spending a bit more time to understand how the system can help you. So who is LandApp, or where are we today? I just thought it'd be worth sharing on the screen that we've been in business since 2017, and since then have been growing through a number of different partnerships to be a trusted independent mapping tool that's used across the sector. And so many of these logos on the screen you'll recognize, but it's from landed estates, farm clusters, environmental NGOs, government agencies, supermarkets, and rural professionals as well. And all of them are coming to LandApp for a trusted place that's easy to use to start creating maps. All of those interested in land, whether that is about sales plans, whether that's about regenerative agriculture, whether that's about environmental protection, all of them have got a common interest in land. And that's what we do. We're really trying to help these different users, these different working groups, use good tooling to help protect land for whatever reason they choose to do so. And how we do that is we're ultimately a technology platform. So it's really worth saying from the start, we're not an advisory body. We're not a government agency. We are an independent mapping company that's set up a tool called LandApp that provides data to you as end users. And very much today, when I talk about data, that is understanding, where in the world your farm sits, where in the world your field parcels start and end, and also what's contained within those field parcels as well. Where is your cropped area? Where is your woodland? Where is the county boundary, etc. And that data is really important to give you context. Secondly, we also help people connect. So one of the main reasons that I joined LandApp back nearly 6 years ago was I was so excited about its collaborative functions. It is in a world now where we're very connected. There's social media, there's different ways of sharing documents, but there was very few tools to help you share a map, and actually being able to connect with relevant people, whether that's your neighbors or whether that's your relatives, your family members, or whether it's your supply chain. It's really important for everyone to be working off that same source of truth and collaborating if we're going to see progress in the sector. And ultimately, then, what we're trying to do is help people make decisions. We are never going to make decisions for you. As a land manager or as a landowner or a grower or a farmer, you have to make decisions all the time. But if we can provide you with a tool that helps you make those decisions, we've done our job. We're here to help you appraise and quantify and understand. But it fundamentally is going to be down to that land manager, that individual, to actually make the decisions on the ground. And Tim, our founder, always says, we're here to service the land manager ultimately, and there's lots of other people around that can help. So please don't feel like you're alone, but we're ultimately here to help you make informed decisions. And then I just wanted to basically put on the screen farm data principles. So this is a growing movement in the land sector about how platforms and how data is being collected. So we've signed up and become certified under the farm data principles. And fundamentally, this webinar series is us, I guess, trying to continue following these different standards. So fundamentally, your data is your data. All the data created in LandApp by yourselves is owned by you, which means you can choose who you share it with. We try and make it easy for you understanding what the data is and how you can access it. We obviously, and hopefully that is clear, we keep your data safe. It's your data. It's our job is to make sure that's safe, and we have permissioning and security, which I can touch on in Q&A if people are interested. But also, I think this final point is, we're clear about the value and benefit of data sharing. Data is a really valuable asset, but we need to make sure that people are understanding who they're sharing with it, who they're sharing it with, and what value it is to share that data as well. And very much this nature risk resilience reporting falls in all of these different buckets. Oh yeah, and here's their logo. But you can Google farm data principles. They've got quite a nice interactive website. Um, so nature risk resilience reporting is probably many of you on this call have come because of one of the logos on the screen. There's definitely others. And all of these different individuals have I guess, a vested interest in supporting the everyday land manager to understand where they're at the moment in terms of their opportunity and how much benefit they're bringing nature, but also what their risk profile is and how they can be supported in reducing that risk profile. So these retailers on the left, for example, their fundamental raison d'etre is to ensure that food is on shelves. So we want to make sure that farmers are producing food and they're mitigating risks from, say, flooding or drought. They also have internal targets, so they're setting, mainly due to customer pressure, they're setting internal targets to try and make sure that they're becoming more sustainable and they are tracking how their impact on the environment is reducing. But also have these external reporting frameworks as well, and probably the acronyms I don't need to go into, but there's a lot of external pressures on retailers, and just getting the right data in the right place, you're contributing to making their ability to report on it a lot easier. And also they've got customers that they're trying to, I guess, differentiate themselves with. And so messaging and helping these retailers to sell your produce on your behalf is beneficial. If we can support all farmers to become more sustainable and these retailers can justify that, slight price increase to their customers, we hope it then trickles down to you as individual growers. And then similarly, these suppliers on the right-hand side, they too are trying to demonstrate their environmental impact, but they might be trying to demonstrate it to the supermarkets or to other buyers. But fundamentally, they were also really interested in, providing support and guidance, identifying business opportunities to, market your produce better. And also some of them are interested in rewarding best practice, whether that's through long-term contracts, whether that's through price premiums, whether that's through other projects. And all of them have got an interest, therefore, in data. And if we can provide them with a view of your data in a secure way and tick all these boxes, they're hopefully going to be able to be of more benefit to you as well. And I think my final slide before I'm going to dive into the demo is just worth saying that you've only got one farm. I mean, some of you may farm multiple boundaries, but in essence, that one farm should be mapped only once. So today's demo is really about how do we get this concept of one farm and one map, but give you the ability to share that data with whoever you wish, whether it's with a particular processor or more further up the chain with a particular retailer. But in essence, one farm, maintaining that one farm, keep iterating on that one farm means that all of these, I guess, recipients of your data are satisfied without you having to maintain multiple threads of conversation. And then we've got lots of different case studies, lots of different great things happening in the field. So as part of the follow-up email, I'm sure we will include a link to the case studies, but we cover a whole range of things, whether you're a livestock farmer, a fresh produce grower, an indoor fruit supplier, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of really nice case studies about how all these different productive systems are using nature reporting to build business strategy and to build business resilience fundamentally. What we're going to aim for by the end of today's demo then is this concept of these farm level maps. I will be building one from scratch, but also as a bit of a Blue Peter moment, I'm going to show you what the baselines look like in the software in a moment. But I think one thing that's worth saying just before we go into the maps is that we will be talking in a habitat language that we call the UK Habitat Framework. And so on the left-hand side, apologies if it's quite small, you can see all these different types of codes that the habitats are classified as, but it is a way of us standardizing the language of which we talk about natural and physical things. So rather than just talk about a field parcel, during the presentation, I'll be talking about, a grassland field parcel or a woodland field parcel. And by talking in a consistent language, it means that regardless of whether you're an estate that's growing potatoes or a farm that's got, grazing rights on it, et cetera, we're talking about the same thing by using a consistent language. And so this helps us be able to map every woodland, river, heathland, grassland, cropland type, et cetera, across the whole of the UK, agnostic of what's happening within those fields, agnostic of whether it's being grazed by a sheep or, being cut for hay. We're interested in what's physically there, and that's what we're going to be mapping. won't talk about it today, but we're also using that same language for that future vision. But that please do come back for webinar 3 to understand how that folds into place. And in essence, the ultimate aim is by mapping your farm correctly, by understanding what the physical assets that make up your farm, like how much woodland do you have, where is the river, where are the ponds, where are the woodlands. All of that data allows us to calculate a suite of metrics. And these metrics cover a number of different scores. So it could be things like habitat cover or connectivity of your habitats, or how much wintergreen cover is being used on an annual basis in a standardized way. And so, again, this is a bit of a teaser for webinar 2. In webinar 2, we're going to go into detail about these metrics. But by the end of today's webinar, we would have at least created a baseline, started generating some scores, but I won't be going into detail about the scores themselves today. That's definitely reserved for webinar 2. Okay, so I'm hoping if I stop sharing, I can bring up a screen. And I'm really going to start from the top. So in essence, as I mentioned, LandApp is a mapping platform, and we are found at thelandapp.com. So just to go real back from the top, if you're struggling to access us, you need to go on any web browser. That can be Google, that could be Safari, and just search the LandApp or go to thelandapp.com. This is our website, so you can have a little look at different things. We've got testimonials, we've got functions, we've got community pages for all the different case studies that I mentioned. But the main one I want to ensure today is that everyone's got a free account. Everyone is using the system in the same way. Everything I'm demonstrating today and for the whole of webinar 2 as well is completely free for farmers. So everything I'm showing, you don't need to pay LandApp a penny. There are going to be some elements in webinar 3 that I do touch on our subscription service if it's of interest, just to demonstrate the wider value. But as of today, you can come to the LandApp and you can create a free account by either hitting get a free account or sign up. If you're having any issues, do get in touch. When you log in, what you're met with is what we call our organization maps. And so I've got lots of different maps that have been created by my team. And it's just worth just a bit of navigation, because some of you have already had maps created, and hopefully in this page, you should see those maps that have been created. If you can't, it's also just a top tip to check the shared with me button, because in the shared with me button, that will load all of the maps that are outside of my ownership. That might be an advisor that's made it for you, or in some instances, LandApp's made it for you as well. So if you can't see what you're looking for in my organization map, please do look in the shared with me folder as well. Just in a bit of a Blue Peter fashion then, while I do a bit of an orientation, is the destination by the end of today is I'm going to hopefully show you how you can get a map that looks like this. And so this is our founder's farm down in Surrey. It is what we call a baseline habitat map. And as I said in my slides, this is a map that represents the farm in its entirety. So it's the whole farming business. This isn't just one enterprise. This is looking at your entire farming business and what makes up the physical elements of your farm. So I think the first thing to say is that we will have field boundaries. So you can see these different field blocks that have got slightly different colors. The colors represent the habitat code. So the lighter green represents grassland. And on the right-hand side, you can see what the code means when you click on a shape. And then the orange and white stripes means arable land, etc. And then also the darker green, which you can see in here, is woodland. So there's lots of different woodland types. And by the end of the demo, I'm hoping we can get to a point that looks like this. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new map, because I'm assuming there's going to be people on this call that haven't managed to get a map created, which is absolutely fine. So I'm firstly going to hit this create new map button at the top left. I'm going to call this demo webinar 1 mapping. I've actually got like so. And what this does is this then drops me on an interactive map. And so this is when people say the LandApp, this is ultimately what we are. We're an interface on your on a website that allows you to start looking at mapping data. All of this is interactive, so you can zoom around the country by clicking and dragging, and it takes a while, well, not a while, but it takes a moment to get used to clicking and dragging your mouse, or I'm using a little trackpad, and then you can zoom in and out. And again, you can do this by either rolling on a mouse wheel, if you've got a mouse, or at the bottom left-hand side, we've got these these different zoom in and out buttons. Even before you've mapped your farm, there's a lot of benefits that you can use Land App for that I thought I'd just spend 2 minutes explaining, and then we can get into the detail of building a bit of a boundary. So the first thing to say is on the free system, we've got lots of different base maps that you can use, and it's basically the ones that are not labeled. So for example, we've got Stadia imagery, which is a bit of a view of the UK from kind of a satellite. And then we've got that exact same view, but you can add labels to it as well. So there's these kind of different drop downs for the different base maps that you can see. OpenStreetMap is kind of the clear one, and then Stadia Maps is the more satellite-based one. For those that are on a subscription, just as a demonstration, we do have other base maps that are quite exciting. So for example, we have got the historic Ordnance Survey maps from 1900, so you can get a bit of a view of what the farm looked like circa 1900s. And we've also got higher resolution aerial imagery as well. So just as a note, you won't have access to all the base maps on the free system, but there's lots of great ones that I will be using for the demo for you to be able to play around with. The second thing that you can also do within the free account before you even created your farm boundary is you can have a look at data layers. And I'll come back to these later, particularly in webinar 3, because they're really helpful for looking at the future plan. But within here, we've got lots of different types of data that you can turn on and off. And all of these data layers that you can see are freely available for you to use however you wish. So for example, I can turn on public rights of way as a data layer, and you can see it's loaded up all the different public rights of way. And if I make the boundary slightly different, you get all of these different lines. So you can see which parts of my field are registered with Highways England, for example, as part of the public rights of way system. Alongside that, we've got lots of different designations. If you want to see where triple SIs or green belt is or brownfield sites, there's lots of different data layers that you can turn on. Just be conscious that the more data layers you turn on, the heavier or the harder your computer has to work. So if you sense that your computer feels a bit slow, just be conscious to hide all data layers, which you can do with a click up top here. I think it'd be a miss to not give a bit of a shout out to our new data layer that we added the other day, which I'm personally very excited about, which is Cranfield's National Soil Map. This is a data set that we've been looking to get in for ages, which I'm delighted to say is now free. Used to have to pay Cranfield an annual license for it, but they've worked out a deal with the government, which is beneficial to everyone on this call. And this data basically shows the soil type for all these different areas. But not only that, if you click on one of the shapes, you get a lot of information about that particular soil type. So how you can better protect the water, what types of habitat are best positioned to grow on that soil type, and generally what crops are best suited as well. So it's quite interesting that you can click on a particular parcel of soil and learn a bit more about your land. So that's kind of the data layers. I will come back to data. I will come back to some of them a bit later, but I wanted to now spend just 10 minutes just showing the different ways that you can build kind of a red line boundary and ultimately that baseline habitat map. So the first thing to say is we have a search bar at the top. So you can search for a particular postcode. So I'm just going to go near my parents' house, just to give me a bit of an area to focus on. So I've searched in a postcode. That's then dropped me into a particular location. And I can do a number of things here, but the main one I'm going to do is just show you how to quickly get a red line boundary. And a red line boundary is a term used particularly by land agents, just as an extent of where the farm is. And you can do that by creating a new plan based on the land registry data set. And the way that you do this is you hit new plan at the top left, you go for use template, and then you can choose one of the many templates that we have, but just as a catch-all, we have this blank one. And then you can choose from land registry and just do read the caption. If you're in England and Wales, you want to choose this one. Okay, if you're in Scotland, you want to choose this one. But we've covered the whole of Great Britain with land registry, providing it's registered. So if I click pick from land registry, what this does is this now loads up all the land registry parcels, so including all the different buildings. And you have this automatically turned on, which is select all parcels within title. And that allows me to click on one or more parcels that make up my land. I don't actually own any of this land, by the way, but just wanted to demonstrate that if I click on these shapes, it highlights them. Once you're happy with the shapes that you've selected, so I'm just going to choose just this one for now. You can hit next and you can give it a name if you want, like land registry boundary. And what that does is that's now created this interactive shape that represents my farm. This boundary can be styled, you can make it as pretty as you want. But in essence, this is now a land registry red line boundary that allows me to share or amend a bit of a plan of what's happening on the ground. Contained with that is a number of information points as well, like your title number. So if you want to go get title deeds, you can. And also like the total area, which in this case is 81 hectares. I can change, I know there's going to be some of you that prefer to work in acres. You can just tell Land App that you'd rather acres by clicking on the drop down and choosing your unit of interest. So this, just worth saying from this point that to create your baseline, we've got lots of different guidances depending on whether if you're in England, whether you're in Scotland, or whether you're in Wales. And actually just released a Northern Ireland guidance as well, which is very exciting. I will be demonstrating the more common one, which is the English demo. However, if you've got any questions, please use the Q&A, and we will be circulating all of the guidances for the various different devolved nations as well. But just to kind of demo how you can get to that land registry, so it's that SBI number, best guess baseline, or at least some form of baseline. With an SBI number, I thought it'd be worth just demonstrating that to everyone. So the way that you do that is you can hit new plan and import data. So this is just a slightly different one. And then you can hit import from Rural Payments England, like so. And you can type in your 9-digit SBI number, which is available on the Rural Payments system if you don't know what yours is. And from there, you can download one of 3 different data sets. So you can download land covers, land parcels, and hedgerows. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to bring in the information to a particular template. And so for this one, I'm just going to choose basic payment, just because it demonstrates it as a bit of a land cover map. And I'm just going to call this BPS an example. We know basic payment is fading out, or has already phased out for many, but just to demonstrate that process, about bringing in parcels outside of the land registry. So you can see by doing that import, I've now got access to a map that shows, in this case, my land covers. And if I just move to Ordnance Survey, you can see that's slightly cleaner. So where my grass fields are, etc., etc. For those that are in Wales or those that are in Scotland, you can get to this point, and we have got some guidance. It just requires you to log into the Rural Payments Wales system rather than being able to do it directly in Land App. It's something that we're working on towards. But in essence, yeah, you can download your land parcels data from Rural Payments Wales, for example. So once I'm in this area, I've got a map showing my farm, and as a reminder, this is where it gets quite exciting, where you can turn on things like flood zones and have a little play with these different flood layers. Just going to work out which ones, where the different flooding areas are, and it's quite intuitive to be able to see, in this case, which of my farm buildings, for example, does the model suggest are most at risk of flooding. So I can see that I've got these risk layers coming through here. Is this particular block of land in the east of my demo farm that potentially is something that I want to consider? How do I mitigate that flooding? From this plan, and again, this is in the guidance, you can do a number of different things. But in relation to the nature reporting plan, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes turning this into a baseline habitat assessment. And so I've got my land cover map. This is showing where my different permanent grass fields are. It's showing where my woodland blocks are. But the language I'm currently using is, in this instance, the land cover map from the Rural Payments Agency that's under the basic payment. So to make your lives easier, what we've built into the system is the ability to translate these BPS codes into a UK HAB map. And I'm doing this just to kind of jump through to a baseline. But in essence, you can take that land cover map and translate it into the language of the UK habitat classification. And the way that you do that is you hit the three dots next to land cover, you hit duplicate, and on this list, you're looking for the habitat classification, which is called baseline habitat assessment. If you scroll to the bottom, you can also give it an updated name. So I'm just going to call this baseline example. Like so. And by doing that, what that's now done is it's now translated my land cover map into habitats. So you can see now I've got the various different UK habitat codes that make up my farm. One thing within your, I guess, download, so whether you've got this from Rural Payments Wales or whether you've got this from the Rural Payments Agency in England, is that it doesn't know your farm as well as you do. And so even though we've downloaded this data and we've got a baseline habitat map, a real important step, and what I want to spend the next 10 minutes doing, is explaining how you can improve the quality of this map. And that can include going a bit further down the classification where you know you've got more insight about what's happening within those fields, but also adding other features that may be missing, whether that's hedgerows, whether that's ponds, whether that's, margins, for example. So the first thing to say is that there's some of these shapes that haven't got a color. And that's not because we don't know what they are. It's just that in the system, we know it's some form of arable land, but we don't know what type of arable land it is. And so to give these a color, ultimately, and to give them a habitat classification, you can hit the Assign Use button at the top right-hand side. And here you get a full list of all the different things that fall within the UK habitat framework. One thing we've added is this ability to show descriptions. And so this will allow you to read the different UK habitat definitions that best suit this area of land. So I know, for example, that this area of land is it's a tussocky kind of field margin. It's more of a plot. And so you can read the definition here to make sure it fits with what you're looking for. So grass margins around arable fields. So this isn't quite the one I want, but I know it's cultivated annually. So it's margins, temporary grass. So I'm just going to choose this one just in the name of time. I think it is that one. But you can read the definitions about what's actually happening on the ground. By clicking on that shape, you're then assigning that particular feature or that particular field parcel. In this case, arable field margins with pollen and nectar. Okay, so just to recap on that, you click on the shape, you can hit change, and you can also search as well. So if I knew it was tussocky instead, I can update that, and it's now arable field margins with tussocky grass. And so a big part of nature reporting is making sure that your baseline is as accurate as you can. It's not to say you're an ecologist and you're not replacing the need for someone to go and ground truth it, but there's a huge amount of insight that can come from just a good up-to-date baseline habitat map. And I think that's a really key thing for this webinar series is, we're not trying by the end of the 3 webinars to get you a perfect to the nth degree habitat map, but we want to give you the tools to be able to, at least to the best of your efforts, maintain a correct habitat map and one that you believe is true. And I think that's a really important distinction. So with the different grassland fields, for example, within nature reporting, it's important to try and be as, I guess, precise as you can at that field level. And so just saying it's grassland perhaps isn't enough. I can have a little look at grassland and see the different types of grassland that are listed within here. And again, we're not expecting you to be an ecologist, so please don't, if there's things that don't make sense to you, please don't worry. But we have got some really helpful guidance around distinguishing between the different types of grassland. And with that soil data as well, that might be able to help. I think one thing with grass fields, it's worth saying that many agricultural fields, unless they've got a particular management style that's trying to, I guess, maximize species, whether that's rotational grazing or a hay management system, many of the agricultural fields that are productive are modified grassland. So you can click modify grassland. But again, please read the definition and do reach out if you've got any questions. One top tip is you can bulk annotate. So what I mean by that is rather than clicking on each individual field and clicking change and then typing in the particular code, what you can do instead is you can either hold shift on your keyboard to choose many, like so. I can choose these 5 fields all at once and then change them all to G4. What you can do instead is you can actually select all of the field parcels that have got the same habitat code by right-clicking. So I've just clicked on the right-hand side of my mouse, clicked select all feature type, and that's now highlighted all of the fields that are currently listed as G grassland, and I can change them all at once by typing in modify grassland. So you can see now that my map has gone from having a mixture of pale green and this more fluorescent green to all of them being modified grassland. Worth saying that as we're a mapping platform, we know that people sometimes make mistakes. Don't panic. If you have made a mistake, we have got an undo button at the top of your screen, which allows you to undo your last action. So you can see by me hitting undo, some of them are now that pale green and some of them are the fluorescent green. And similarly, you can redo, you can go back forward. So if you have made a mistake, one of the worst things you can do is refresh your screen. Just take a moment, take a breather, and hit the undo button, which is a really helpful little steer. What I want to just quickly show you is there's going to be some, I guess, data layers that can help me understand what's happening on the ground. So I know this farm quite well. And for example, within the priority habitat inventory of England, I know that some of these fields are actually contained within this particular grassland. So this is a good quality semi-improved grassland. And I think recently it was surveyed. And so I know, and this is just from insider knowledge, that actually this is a neutral grassland that's kind of moving towards this lowland meadows code as well. So I can update my my habitat map. So lots of different ways to improve your habitat map. You can select a feature and you can assign it as a whole field. However, it might be that some of your features are not currently showing that are smaller than the one particular field parcel. And so I'm just going to show you one, but again, we've got lots of different guidance documents that can show you how to do this. Actually, I'll show you two. I'm going to show you how to do a pond. So for example, if hypothetically there was, and I actually think on this farm, they are looking to build a pond down here. So hypothetically, if there was a pond in this that you could see on satellite or that you were interested in adding to your map, and we can see it in here, what you can do is you can click on the field parcel and you can draw a new shape. And so those new shapes could be an area or it could be a circle. So I'm just going to demonstrate the circle just for simplicity. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to draw your pond in this case using a perfect circle. And then you hit finish to actually commit to that pond being drawn. Worth saying that once it's a circle, you can amend the radius. So, if you know it's 10 meters radius or 9.5, etc., you can update it here. Once you're happy with the size, you can assign it to a pond. And again, there's lots of different types of ponds on the list. So please do read the definitions. And in this case, I'm just going to put it as a temporary pond. The final step, though, is worth saying is that this pond is currently floating on top of your grassland. So you'll see that the 0.3 hectares, of pond that I've just drawn is sat on top of my grass field. And what I just need to do is I then just need to hole punch the pond through the back of the grass field. And I do that by hitting a subtract button. And the subtract button is found, he says, within, move my zoom, within this buffer tool for you to then subtract that pond. And what that's now done is there's now a pond-shaped hole in my grass field, which means that my map is two-dimensional. It's flat and it's flush. Okay. The final thing I want to show before we swiftly move on to a quick teaser and then Q&A is just how to draw hedgerows. So I've already got on my map in this BPS example lots of hedgerows. So if I go back to this view, you can see I've already got these hedges here, which is great. You can bring them all over to your baseline by kind of selecting them all and copying them onto your baseline. And again, we've got guidance on that. But in the instance where your hedge isn't showing, or you can't see the correct hedge, so here's all the hedges I've just brought over, you can actually draw a hedgerow between two fields. And to do that, you first click on your field. So click on the field parcel. You then go to draw and then line. And then we have this concept called snap to line. And basically my mouse will automatically trace the outside of that field parcel. So that, that grass field in this instance, and therefore allow me to double click, hit finish. And I've now drawn what is quite an accurate hedge line that's following the outside of my field parcel. And again, I can assign, just like I did with the grassland, I can assign that one line, in this case, that hedgerow, to the correct habitat code, which in this case is H2 hedgerows. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how to build a baseline. Depending on whether you're in England and Scotland or Scotland and Wales, the initial point might be slightly different, but please do get in touch if there's any questions. The final stage before we come to Q&A is this concept of how to submit data. And I will be re-showing this in webinar 2, but to access your metrics and to find out what the scores that this farm generates, you can hit the nature reporting button, hit start sharing, and add your farm details. So I'm just going to call it demo farm era and say I'm a tenant, say I'm red tractor, and submit. And then I'm going to submit my baseline. So I'm going to select the baseline and choose baseline example, like so. And then you can see I've got an error that's popped up, which is really useful. So it's basically saying for an accurate baseline, please assign a habitat feature, a habitat to all features. So I will fix that in just a moment. But the final step is I can publish. And the reason I'm doing it this way around is I just want to show that actually you can publish a not perfect map. You can share with your particular retailer or supermarket your map before it's perfect, because once you've made that connection, once you've shared the data, you don't need to do that again. You could just keep your map updated. You can keep editing it, and the scores will automatically update for the end recipient. I'm just going to, that's a demo, say I'm Darian Muller, and then publish it to just pending. So for the accurate baseline bit, just to show you, I've got these little white spaces. And so I just need to basically go around the farm and remember that, hold shift, and just make sure that all of the features that I want are assigned correctly. So in this case, I want to make sure that these are all arable field margins, and I've got some grassy margins as well. But you can fill in the blanks like so. Okay. So that was building a baseline. I'm conscious of time, and I didn't get around to showing my print function, but you can access your print function at the top right-hand side by creating a new frame and just following the guidance. It's worth saying that Ordnance Survey data you have to pay for. So if you want a high quality Ordnance Survey print, you can do that. You have to pay a license to Ordnance Survey, or we have got these open source prints as well, like OpenStreetMap. So you can create quite a nice print using the print functions for your farm without having to pay, because it's free of charge. But that I will happily go into more detail in the Q&A if people are interested. But I'm going to revert to the team and look at the questions. Okay, so question number 1 from Anonymous is, who can actually see my metric report when I add collaborators to my map? So that's a really good question. So within the Land app, there's kind of 2 different ways of collaborating. The first one, which is the one I've just shown, which is the nature reporting kind of collaboration, is the only people that will be able to see your farm scores are those that you share with. So on this list, there's lots of different potential customers that are asking you for you to share your map with them. By sharing them via this nature reporting route, they won't have access to your map. They will just have access to your scores, which I will tease in a moment, about what percentage of your farm is, habitat cover, what counties it in, et cetera, et cetera. By sharing them with nature reporting, you're not sharing access to your map. One other way you can share your map, though, is through our collaborating function. So we have this sharing settings button at the top right-hand side of the screen. Apologies if my head is in the way of it. That sometimes happens. But within that sharing settings, you can also add collaborators to your map. So by doing this, for example, if I added Will to the map, I can ask Will, who's a colleague that's on the call, to either come in as a viewer, which means they can come in and zoom in and out and click on shapes, but they can't fundamentally edit anything. or I can ask him to be an editor and hitting invite. By doing that, Will get an email to say Dan has added him to your map. By doing that, you give them access to your mapping data, but also to your nature reporting scores. So that's a really nice way of sharing it, say, with family members or other collaborators like an advisor. Got another question saying, I need to map field risks. Are you going to add irrigation licenses and water outfalls as a data layer? Yeah, that's a really good question. So we do have the ability to map field risk. So I showed you some of the data layers around surface flow. I've shown you some of the soil data, and we actually have a template called risk, field risk. I need to say where it is. Field risk map. So you can map using the field risk map, or within the blank template, there's some really nice options like no spread zones, etc. But in terms of the data layer, are you going to add water outfalls as a data layer? I will add that to the list. I need to have a look at what they are, but high level, if there's a data layer that you currently want access to that you can't see on this list, please do send us a message. We've got this little chat function at the bottom right hand side of the screen where you can send us a message and just say, I would like, what do you call it? Irrigation licenses and water outfalls. And you can basically send that to the team. And one of the team will be able to respond to you. So you can see that Rosie, Simon, and Simla are currently there, ready for your questions. So feel free to ask the team any questions you've got. Can I draw a grid for planning irrigation? Yeah, that's a really good question. So you can. We've recently added the ability, although I need to double check whether this is in the free tier. I think it is, to draw a grid. So rather than just drawing a line like I did for the hedgerows, our standard users will be able to basically draw this kind of grid structure. And this allows you to, basically define how you want your grid to look. So in this case, let's make it a bit bigger. I want it 300 meters. I want 30 rows and 30 columns. And that should update my plan to show, there we are. It's quite big. Maybe I've gone too big. I've then created a bit of a grid plan that I can move around my map, interact with, update, etc., as a way of drawing that grid. So hopefully that shows you how to draw a grid. Maybe I was a bit optimistic with my 300 meters, but yeah, you've got that ability to then add that grid onto your map. But just to reiterate, I've just heard from the booth, it is in standard at the moment. So the grid isn't available for free users. You do need to be on a subscription to be able to draw the grid. I have all my fields separated into individual files from Omnia. How can I import them all into Landif in bulk? This would save me time. Yeah, that's a really good question. So we do spend quite a lot of our support time just helping farmers and new customers upload existing data. So I guess my ask to you would just be send us a message. So either drop us an email at support@thelandapp.com. One of the team members will be able to respond to it. Or if you're in app, you can just send us a message, as I talked about irrigation licenses, if you've got data from, say, Omnia or another source. For those that do want to self-serve, it is just worth saying that you can import data into LandApp. So when I hit new plan, we have got this import data button, and you can just import files. So if you've got any one of these file formats, so GeoJSON, which is just another GIS like mapping one. If you've got KMLs, which is used on Google Earth, for example. Recently, we've just added CSVs. So those are like Excel spreadsheets. So if you've got data that you want to drop onto the map, you can give it a go here first. But if things don't look right or you need support, please do message our team, because one of them will be happy to help. Question, is there much difference in ponds priority habitat and ponds and scrapes? Yeah, so again, worth looking at the definitions for each of those. What I would say is that ponds and scrapes, let me just delete my grid just because it's taking up my space. Ponds and scrapes, let's have a quick look. Ponds, temporary ponds. So ponds, water bodies containing water normally for less than 6 months a year. So I guess, yeah, priority habitat ponds are those that are shown on the priority habitat, and then temporary ponds and scrapes are those that have got water less than 6 months a year. I guess it's just worth me saying that if you want a fuller definition of all the different habitat codes, I'd really recommend just going to ukhab.org, and you can register for free. But on here, you can download all of the habitat classification system. You just need to register with your email for a free account. What is actually visible to processors in supermarket I submit my maps to? What do they see? Yeah, this is a really good question. So I mentioned earlier that they don't see any of your maps. So by submitting it to your processor or your supermarket, they don't see this view. What they instead see is a what we call, and actually I could probably demonstrate it quickly, is they will have access to, whether that's Sainsbury's or Waitrose or someone else, they will have access to kind of the nature reporting system from behind the scenes. And if I type in, this is kind of their view. Let's get some demos up. So what in essence they will see is this table. And so each of these tables represent one farm. So they'll see your farm coming through as a bit of a demo, as a holding name and map name. It will then be tagged with your produce type and what processor you've shared with. These are all dummy data points, by the way, hence why they all look the same. But what they'll see is each of your farms scored against a number of different metrics. So I won't be going into those metrics today, but lots of different metrics around, uplift units, habitat extent, condition, etc., that they can look at one or more columns of. So if they wanted to see which of our farms has got the best connectivity, they can download that data and they can view it. It's worth saying if any of the farmers here are with Waitrose, as part of that project, you can opt in to be anonymous. If you opt in to be anonymous, your holding name and your surname is empty. So you're just given a unique number. But the metrics that are calculated are all shown on the screen at the moment, which, by the way, and we will be touching on in the webinar in 2 weeks' time, are also available to you as as a farmer. So you'll be able to see what metrics through the nature reporting metrics page, which we'll be talking about next week. So here's the dummy data that we made earlier, but these are the types of scores that your supermarket or your retailer sees for you. They won't see the map, but they will see farm name is in this county and is currently got a 8.94 habitat coverage, for example. Question, and yeah, I think that's a really important point. Webinar 2, we're going to get really under the skin of the metrics. What are the metrics? So please do come join us, because I'd love to spend a bit more time talking about those specifically. And also I will be talking about what the supermarkets see and why they care about those metrics. Am I supposed to update my map? If so, how often? This is a very good question. Thank you so much. Yes, in essence, you're meant to update your map annually if things have changed, but a good practice would just be, as soon as something changes on the ground, please do update your baseline. And the reason that's important is that all of the ethos of what we're trying to achieve and demonstrate is what we call continuous improvement. Is little changes across small farms or against one farm, when added up across the whole supply chain, make quite a big impact. So if you've planted a new hedgerow this year, or you've widened your margins from 3 to 6 meters, or you've established a grazing regime that's improving the quality of your grass, do add that to your baseline, because those iterative improvements are what the supermarkets are really keen to see, and it's what the processors also want to see as well, is demonstrating some form of behavior change on the ground. They're never going to tell you particularly what metric they're trying to drive, but what they want to see is continuous improvement. And so the expectation as of today for anyone who's been asked to go through nature reporting is at least looking at your map once a year and updating it where relevant. But definitely every 2 years, we would expect to see some form of change, whether that is rotational land moving, or whether that's, acquisition of a field, or, you've sold a field. But the baseline is trying to be as, up to date as possible. So there's no reason you don't update it every month. And it just takes, 5 or 10 minutes just every month, just to make sure that the habitat map that you've got drawn is correct. But it's worth saying we do have this whole help center page, which you can access through that little chat bot at the bottom. but you've got a huge amount of resources in here, such as the FAQs, how to access your farm metrics, how to understand your metrics. So yeah, have a little read of those. If there's anything that's not clear, please do let us know. Okay, so according to my team behind the scenes, firstly, thank you so much for the questions. That's been really useful. I think I've covered all the questions. So what that leads me to say is I will put my slides back up. Next session, we're going to be diving into kind of the key metrics. So these are just some of the ones that we're going to be talking through next in the 2 weeks' time. Connectedness, habitat cover, wintergreen cover. So please do join the session if you want to learn a bit more about the metrics and how you can, I guess, build your baselines to make sure they're a true reflection of the scores that you're generating. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but please don't feel when you're using LandApp you're alone. We've got a really strong support team, and you can contact us through the website. There's a contact form, or as I've shown, there's that little button at the bottom right of your screen when you're mapping, where you can send us a message or search for help. And nature reporting, as I said, there's a whole help center page for, I guess, supporting you in completing and maintaining that data set as well. So there's lots of different things in there, including questions and answers to a number of different things, like what are the benefits to you as a farming business, for example. So loads of great questions in there that please feel free to have a little look. But we want this to be a conversation. We are, I guess, entering new territory, and we're really excited about the potential of this. But we need to make sure the farmers are bought in and they understand the steps and how it affects them, and it hopefully helps them move forward into the future. Done the Q&A. So leaves me to say and wrap up 2 minutes early. Thank you so much for your participation. If you've got any questions, please message support@thelandapp.com. And we will be circulating this recording as well as a reminder for the next session over the next 24 hours or so.